Before we get going into the specifics of the portfolio, let's talk a little bit about what are the requirements for the CCIM designation. This may be old news for a lot of you, but sometimes we are surprised how many people are not up to date on the requirements. The first requirement would be to become an actual dues-paying candidate of the Institute. Before you can submit a portfolio, you actually need to become a dues-paying member of the Institute. The second would be, of course, to complete all of the 4 core classes. And then additionally, here in recent years, we've added an 8-hour negotiation training class, which is an online class. We recommend that you take it prior, or actually they're saying you must now take it prior to taking CI 103 and 104. Now we've changed the electives. You used to have 3 electives. We've reduced it to 2 electives now because we added the negotiation training class. So they only need 2 electives. And as most of you remember, you get 1 elective for every 12 months that you're a dues-paying member of the Institute as a candidate. You can also get an elective by taking the comprehensive course review class. You can also get a credit by taking the 2-day CI intro class. So it should be easy for people to get the electives. You need to complete an online, it's free, but it's an online ethics training class. And then, of course, you need to submit and have approved your portfolio of qualifying experience. And then finally, as we all know, successfully pass the comprehensive exam. Next page, please. I want to just take a quick moment. Some of our members have taken the classes over an extended period of time. And the Institute rolls out new course material on a periodic basis. And eventually that course material gets into the comprehensive exam. So at this point, the exam has been updated, and if you have candidates who've taken classes, let's see, back in the 1990s, certainly 2000 or earlier, it's strongly recommended that they retake these classes. You can see the dates on the slide for which new course material was added. And from a practical standpoint, if they have taken a class that more than 12 years ago, how much of it do they remember? They probably need to take it just to refresh themselves before they go and take the comprehensive exam. Rhonda, you want to talk about misuse?
Well, we certainly appreciate all of the chapter leaders taking a role in candidate guidance. Your support really helps the candidates through the process. It's also very beneficial for the Institute and your chapter. The more that you get the candidates involved to join your local chapter early on in the process, the more benefit they receive as well as you. One of the things that we do need to remind everyone is that the candidates may not display the CCIM designation or logo in any manner, and sometimes they get very anxious to share their educational accomplishments as they go through the CI coursework. But you need to remind them that they can only refer to their candidate status in a resume to a prospective employer or broker. Next, we have the candidate guidance schedule, and you can check the website at ccim.com. If you click on the membership tab and then pull down the current candidate tab, you will always get an update of these deadlines. And we ask that you try to keep up with the dates. We will accept them at a later time, but it delays the approval of the candidate's portfolio. So please be aware of these deadlines and take time to share these from time to time with your candidates in your newsletters or anytime you get together to help them through the process. We're going to also talk a little bit about the portfolio's volume requirements. As you all know or are very aware, the last few years we've had some tough economic times, and the volume requirements were relaxed a few years back to help our candidates get through the designation process. The current volume requirements, which will stay in effect through December of 2013, involve exactly 10 qualifying activities that total $5 million of transaction volume or more, or 20 qualifying activities without regard to total volume. So 20 of any volume. If you're working with candidates that do small leases or small transactions, they can reach the volume requirement with 20 activities.
And just a reminder that those all need to have been completed within the last 5 years. That is one of the first things that a portfolio grade is going to look at, is making sure that the transactions or the activities fall within that 5-year period. So we now have 2 online submission options for candidates. One is the traditional portfolio that I'll talk about, and then there's a fairly new streamline option that Rhonda will talk about. The traditional portfolio is what many of you probably submitted years ago, unless you're one of the newer designees. You know, it's the old hard-bound 3-ring binder portfolio. But nowadays, they can also do it, not send in the hard copies. They can actually upload all of those same documents onto the CCIM website for us to take a look at, which saves a lot of time and effort. And one of the nice items about that, if they become a dues-paying member of the Institute, we will set up an account for them to start uploading documents. So if they're a dues-paying candidate for a couple of years, every time they complete a transaction, they could upload the documents into a transaction folder right then and there when it's finished, and not have to try to save it and find it later. So the traditional portfolio is a portfolio that you can submit regardless of how long you've been in the industry. Unlike the streamline, where we'll talk about a 5-year minimum period, somebody could submit this portfolio in a traditional manner with only having been in the industry for a couple of years. To do the traditional, you need to submit an online application form, upload, gives you an idea of who they are, what their history in the industry is, so then submit a summary of qualifying activities, similar to what we did in the hardbound versions at the very beginning of the portfolio. And then for each transaction, there's going to be an activity data form, which is going to tell us what that transaction was all about. And then provide us with copies of the closing and settlement documentation so that we know that the transaction truly closed. And then we need some form of verification of their activity, that they actually materially participated in the transaction. We need at least 2 proofs. And we say at least, the more the better as far as we're concerned, because sometimes they don't have as much documentation as we'd like. Examples of proofs would be certainly a commission check that was issued to them referencing the transaction. So they got paid a commission on that transaction. Signature on a settlement or a closing document, deed showing that the candidate was either the grantee or the grantor, certainly a signed listing agreement or representation agreement, letters of intent or letters of indicating who's representing who. It would be great. It's kind of a final straw would be a notarized statement from either the client or the supervising broker. We only allowed one of those per transaction. So they'll need to at least have something besides notarized letters. And frankly, we've accepted emails. If somebody is negotiating a deal over the internet through emails back and forth, we'd love to see that if that's what they have. Then finally, it's the letter of recommendation from the local chapter representative, whoever the authorized person is. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute.
Now, I'm going to talk about the new and improved way to submit a portfolio, and that's the streamlined portfolio online. And this is applicable to commercial real estate professionals that have a minimum of 5 years in a commercial real estate industry. This really is so much more easy to complete, and we truly encourage you to reach out to candidates in your area who have completed courses and may not be familiar with this option. I know there were quite a few people in our marketplace that were delaying the completion of their designation because they didn't want to sit down and put a huge binder of transactional experience together. And this really does make it much more streamlined and easy for the person to complete the portfolio. They need to complete an application online. They also need to submit a summary of their qualifying activities, all the transactions, the projects, the work product that they've been dealing with during the last 5 years. And to verify that, they need to provide a signed and notarized affidavit from a managing broker, a supervisor, a CPA, someone of authority within their company. And if they've worked for different companies throughout this last 5-year period, they will need a signed and notarized affidavit for each transaction period that will cover different employment or different supervising situations. They also need to provide a detailed explanation of their role and responsibilities in these transactions. And for the streamlined portfolio, we ask that they provide 3 letters of recommendation, one from each of the following: a CCIM designee, and this will be someone who does not work in the same firm that they work in and is not related to the candidate. They will also need to get one from a client that they've had a relationship with and closed a transaction, and your local chapter representative. And this is going to come from your candidate guidance committee. This is where you come in, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation.
We have a new category for professionals in our industry. It's called non-transactional commercial professionals. And this is really designed for people who are high up in very large corporations who have a difficult time proving their material participation in transactions. Their company is doing transactions, but they may be 2 levels above. Somebody said it's kind of like they're the puppet master. They're not actually out there in the trenches, but they're calling the shots. And so this would include people who hold, let's say, the asset manager or portfolio manager title. This includes commercial tax consultants or corporate real estate department heads, or even managing brokers for really large firms, where they may have the whole team underneath them, but again, they're not in the trenches doing it, but they're involved in one way or the other. So these people need to show us that they have been in that job with the same exact title for the last 5 years, full-time, doing that same job. If they can do that, then they need to submit a streamlined application. They'll use the same streamlined forms, and then submit a professional resume of work experience that confirms their 5 years in commercial real estate and at least 5 years with the same title. Then submit an affidavit verifying that at least 5 years with the same title coming from their supervisors. Then provide a detailed explanation of their roles and responsibilities and give us an idea of what kind of projects that they've worked on during that 5-year period. Also provide us with an organizational chart, and then provide the same 3 letters of recommendations that were required for the streamlined portfolio, that being a CCIM designee giving a recommendation, a client, and then the local chapter representative.
And I'm briefly going to talk about the fast track programs. The first fast track program is for other professionals that are already designated, and there's quite a broad list of designations up here. I'm not going to read each one of them, but when a person who has one of these designees applies for the CCIM candidate, they have 24 months from application to complete their designation. However, no portfolio of experience is required, because by earning these other designations, they've already demonstrated their experience in the commercial real estate industry. The other is the University Fast Track, where a portfolio of experience is required, but they do receive credits for core courses and have elective requirements waived. And this program are for graduates of real estate master's programs from approved colleges throughout the United States. Now we're going to talk a little bit about candidate guidance and how you come into play to be a part of the candidate's process through the designation. First of all, you need to create a candidate guidance committee within your chapter. And the list of people that are going to be interviewing candidates should be provided to the CCIM Institute, to the membership department, so that they are aware of people that are authorized within your chapter to do the interviews and provide the letter of recommendation. And this is very helpful for the candidate, for the senior graders when they go through the process, to know that they have an approved letter from someone within your chapter who is authorized to do these interviews. For a current list of candidates in your area, please reach out to the CCIM Institute. This is a great opportunity to connect with the candidates in your area. It breaks down which courses these candidates have completed, and it allows you to guide them through the process. This is a wonderful way to jumpstart, remind them of all the steps that are necessary to get through the process, and to talk to them a little bit about the chapter recommendation letter, because many are not aware that they actually have to provide these until they sit down at some point in their process. And so it's much better for you to reach out to them early on and give them guidance through the process. And as well, I know that for years I hear from people on the street, well, I can't belong to your CCIM chapter because I'm not a designee. And please reach out to your new candidates, to students who have completed the coursework in your area, and invite them to join your chapter early on and become involved. And it'll be a lot easier for you to go through the interview process if you're already familiar with that candidate.
One of the activities that we hope each of your chapters are doing is putting on portfolio workshops. We try to put those on at least twice during the course of the year, if not more. So who should present these? Well, if you have a portfolio grader in your market, it's always great to have one of those individuals come and do the presentation. But it could be a chapter member on the committee who's very up to date with the current requirements for the portfolio. I would suggest that you download the presentation, the current presentation, from the CCIM website, and you're welcome to call either myself or Rhonda or one of the other graders and ask questions if you don't understand the requirement. Better to ask all your questions before the workshop, and that way it goes a lot smoother. When do you present it? Well, as I said, we try to do this, at least in our chapter, a couple of times a year, usually about 2 months before the next deadline for portfolio submissions. That way it can help guide people and get them, kind of motivated to go out and start putting their portfolios together.
And our chapter also does a workshop every time we offer a course in our community. And we invite all of the candidates and students in our area, as well as provide it as a benefit to those taking the course.
There's a question of how to get a copy of the presentation. It is available to download off of the website. Or if you have difficulty, you can't find it, call Dominique Culpepper, and she can guide you and probably email it to you. So what do you request from a candidate? First of all, they should, we told them they need to contact you and set up an appointment at least several weeks before the deadline. It's not fair to who's ever doing the chapter interview to have 18 people call them 2 days before the deadline, all wanting letters of recommendation. So we're trying to give them a 2-week at least deadline to get their interviews done. And hopefully they'll call you a couple of months ahead of time and schedule a time and do it proactively, but as you and I both know, that doesn't always happen. So what do you request from the candidate? Number one, you should get a summary of the transactions that they're going to submit to us, a resume of their commercial real estate experience, and then schedule a face-to-face interview in the candidate's workplace is ideal, or it could be over the phone. The key here is to really take a look at the information that they're providing you. Especially with the streamlined version of the portfolio, we're not looking at all the documentation like we were in the past. So we're somewhat relying on the letters of recommendation and their broker, et cetera, and you guys to kind of vet these people. So I would go to their website and see what it says about them on their website. If this is a company that does 100%, or looks like they do nothing but residential work, and now if the person is giving you 20 commercial transactions, now you have something to talk to them about in the interview. So again, vet the people. If you know the co-brokers and some of the transactions that they deal, you might just call and ask, hey, did so-and-so really do this transaction with them? So it gives you something to talk about with them. If there are questions, feel them out about their history, because we do want them to have experience.
And the chapter recommendation letter will come from someone that's an authorized interviewer, and that's going to be someone from your candidate guidance committee, or if you're a very small chapter that hasn't set up a large candidate guidance committee, probably someone from your leadership. The form itself, they will ask you for the recommendation letter, the candidate will, and you will submit that form directly to the CCIM Institute. Once you complete it, do not send it back to the candidate. And just a reminder that the chapter recommendation letter is different from the CCIM designee recommendation letter. It should be coming from two different people, and it cannot, the designee should be someone who's familiar with their work within the chapter. So again, this is another reason for your candidates to get involved with your chapter early on, so that they become friends and associates with other designees in your area, and people are more familiar with them, and they're more familiar with your chapter and the Institute.
I would just like to point out that during the interview, and you're filling out the recommendation form, if you have an issue or you suspect there's an issue with a particular candidate, you should mention it in the letter, but do not be the judge and the jury. Just present the information that you're concerned about to us, and let the Institute decide if that's an issue or not. So don't take it upon yourself to make the judgment.
And lastly, we remind everyone that all of these requirements are found on the CCIM website, and they're updated periodically as things change through the board of directors or the designation committee. So please always reference the website for the most current designation handbook and your portfolio workshop PowerPoint. And all of the designee or the candidate items are under the membership category on the website. So you can pull down the tab and easily access it. We have a few questions. It said, can we get a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, I think we did answer that. They can get it downloaded, and or they can contact Dominique. Somebody had also asked, would it include attorneys? And the issue, I'm not sure. The question becomes, how does an attorney qualify? And that's always an interesting question, because if they're just doing legal work in the course of being an attorney, like reviewing legal documents, that in and of itself does not qualify. On the other hand, a lot of attorneys are actively engaged in the transactions, and they're actually in the trenches. They're helping their clients beyond just giving legal opinions. And if they can prove to us, in fact, many of them are just investors themselves, if they can show that they were doing involvement beyond just legal review, then certainly we consider that.
Well, thank you all for participating today.